Pursuant to the order of reference of Tuesday, September 29, 2009, Bill C-50, an act to amend the Employment Insurance Act and to increase benefits. We are going to get started. It's televised today. Just a couple of housekeeping notes for those of you who haven't been before committee before. When we identify you, the microphone will turn on. We're going to get, I'm going to start over on my left-hand side. We're going to move all the way around to my right. You've got 7 minutes each. I'll just wave at you when you're getting close to your 7 minutes so we can get to some questions and answers. We're going to have a first round of 7 minutes each by all parties, and then we're going to go into a second round of 5 minutes, which will be back and forth amongst all parties. I see a hand, and I'll recognize you in a second, Mr. Lessard. There is some additional committee business that we need to deal with. My suggestion is I'm going to set some time at the side to deal with that, so we can talk about another meeting. But I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Mr. Lessard, because I have a feeling that you probably want to talk about another meeting. So go ahead, sir.
Exact, Monsieur le Président. Étant donné que nous avons...
Mr. Chairman, given the fact that there is a vote right after the end of this meeting, and we know that we're really rushed for time, and we should leave the 2 hours to the people who want to make themselves heard, and we agreed to add another session to hear the witnesses that we did not get a chance to invite up to this date. These are major witnesses: Quebec Forestry Industry, National Union Association, etc. So we should hear them out on Thursday this week, and next Tuesday we can go through the section-by-section study.
Okay, what I'm going to suggest, I'll set 15 minutes aside at the end to discuss that very issue. I know there's been some conversations.
We should be okay.
Are we okay with this?
We had just a quick discussion amongst us, and the idea was that there would be, and I should preface, one additional meeting of witnesses on Thursday and a clause by clause on Tuesday, with the understanding there would be no further delays so the bill can get to the House expeditiously.
Do I have consent?
Yes.
You guys work well together. That's perfect. Thank you very much. We're going to start then. I'm going to start over on my left-hand side, so we don't need... Yeah, sorry, I'm redundant. There we go. I think what we'll do, though, is Mr. Martin did want to talk about future business. I'm going to suggest that we set a subcommittee meeting for Wednesday, Madame Foucault, if that's okay, tomorrow, the subcommittee to talk about future business. I was thinking at the same time tomorrow afternoon, 3:30. Why don't we just? Well, I'll put that out there. Let's talk about it the last 5 minutes of the meeting today. I don't want to cut into any more time. I'm going to start over with Pierre Cyr, sir. You've got 7 minutes, sir. We'll give you the floor to start, and then we'll continue around the room. So thank you for being here today. And
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je pensais avoir 10 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I thought I had 10 minutes, but, well, first of all, on behalf of our organization, the Conseil National des Chômeurs Chômeuses, I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the Standing Committee on Human Resources for this invitation to discuss Bill C-50, which would extend the duration of employment insurance benefits. We regret to say that we respectfully disagree with this bill. First of all, we disagree with the approach. The government has chosen to use legislation to play a political trick on the opposition when it could simply have announced the pilot project on September 14th. Obviously, the government opted for a game of political chess, using the victims of the recession as pawns. We oppose this bill because it creates two categories of unemployed persons: the good ones, who have hardly drawn any benefits in the recent years, and the bad ones, who have drawn on the EI system. We disagree with and are very skeptical of the department's figures: 1,190,000 unemployed persons to be helped by the bill. Finally, the bill further complicates an already complicated piece of legislation by creating all kinds of exceptions and applications. For 20 years or so, successive governments in Ottawa have worked to make employment insurance a many-headed beast. a complex act with multiple exceptions and special measures. With Bill C-50, the current government is adding further complications. It is replacing subsection 12.2 of the Act, which is about 6 or 8 lines long, with over 3 pages of all kinds of exceptions. Such subsection 12.2 becomes 12.2.1, 12.2.2, 12.2.3, and 12.2.4, creating a distinction as to when EI benefits are claimed in 4 different periods, and setting out up to 6 possible types of extensions, depending on the number of years premiums are paid. The 20-week extension would only be granted to those who have applied before June 5, 2010, and who paid at least, and I quote, at least 30% of the maximum annual employee's premium in at least 12 of the 15 years before the beginning of the claimant's benefit period, end of quote. All other claimants would receive less, often only 5 weeks. Most importantly, workers who have received more than 35 weeks of benefits in the last 5 years would be excluded. That, of course, means all seasonal, part-time, and casual workers, as well as workers affected by economic slowdowns and those laid off even for short periods in recent years, are therefore excluded whole areas of our economy: the lumber industry, the construction industry, and a large part of the manufacturing industry, to name only a few. The measure also excludes all workers with less labor market seniority. As a result, some unemployed persons will receive a few additional weeks of benefits, while others will not be entitled to receive them, even if they are from the same workplace, the same factory, and live in the same town, if not neighborhood. It is all too clear to us as well that the department's figures do not stand up, if only because the $1 billion announced is necessarily based on a calculation of the average benefits from $348 a week for 190,000 unemployed persons. This simple calculation translates to an average extension of 15 weeks. And if we divide this, it gives us a 15-week extension on the average. Is the bill made to accommodate this kind of extension? Of course not. And if a 15-week extension was truly to be granted, why did the government not proceed accordingly with a simple, clear, and direct bill? Less complicated than that we see here. Would there be, as a matter of fact, 190,000 long-term unemployed persons who can benefit from this measure? We seriously doubt it, based on 2 facts. Just 27.9% of EI recipients exhaust their benefits. The bill excludes all those who have drawn benefits for more than 35 weeks in the last 5 years, and all those with little labor market seniority. And we seriously believe that Bill C-50 will provide $1 billion to 190,000 persons. Equally, older workers deserve more than these few weeks of additional discriminatory benefits and deserve a real assistance program for older workers, which the Conservative government refused to reinstate. In our opinion, the problems with the employment insurance system have not been addressed at all, including the pressing problem of eligibility, for which 10 premiers of 10 Canadian provinces last July asked the Prime Minister this summer to resolve this problem. And of course, many institutions, municipal elected officials, as well as many economists and a range of political observers, have all called on the government to resolve this problem. In the present case, and I will conclude here, it is not up to us to vote on this bill, to defeat it or to pass it. However, we maintain that in its current form, the Bill C-50 is unacceptable. It is discriminatory and does not represent the type of constructive and structural solutions that are expected to repair the state of the employment insurance program. In our opinion, perhaps naively, We believe that policy must provide solutions to problems, and our highest legislative officials must be able to work together. Can the Standing Committee on Human Resources make use of its voice and legislative powers to raise the issues pertaining to employment insurance and put them forth to the Canadian Parliament and before the Canadian population? We believe so, and foremost, we expect so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To Mr. Laliberté, and sir, you've got 7 minutes.
Bonjour, merci.
Afternoon. Thank you. On behalf of the FTQ, I'm glad to be here to testify. And FTQ represents 500,000 workers in Quebec in the private sector. And in Quebec, it has been in recession since 2003. So the official recession began in 2008, but we've been feeling the impact for a few years before that. And this does involve some consequences for us and on our opinion on Bill C-50. The content of the bill, I have 2 main observations to make, and I'll echo what my colleague Pierre Serré was saying. There's an insufficiency of measures proposed for the problem that we're facing, and secondly, the arbitrary and even discriminatory and certainly bureaucratic character of what is being proposed. And let me explain this a bit further. We've already been emphasizing for several years that the employment insurance program is no longer playing its role of a safety net. We reformed it in the 90s, and it was overreach. It went too far, and it still leaves entire groups of workers without a safety net. And the most vulnerable on the job market are those who do not have this safety net. So when the recession began, we're among the worst or least generous systems in the EDC. And we insisted and we expressed our agreement with temporary measures, generous but temporary measures, to try to stop the problem. But that was not very convincing, and many people were left in the lurch. And this seems paradoxical. I won't say a scandal, at least it's a paradox to be polite. There is no macroeconomic measures that has a stronger impact than extending the benefits periods. There is nothing there for that. Infrastructure programs have studied the multiplying effects, and they'll tell you the same thing. And we're expecting a program with teeth, and we're still waiting for it. And the OEDC also shared its projections with us, and we're expecting fairly high unemployment for 1 or 2, 3 years after the official end of the recession. This is a great concern to us. In our opinion, a reform should include a 360-hour single criterion for eligibility. And as you've heard from witnesses, 165 unemployed people, that would be about 1.2 billion. And in the circumstances, we think that this should be done. Let's talk about the measures now. I won't go into the detail because I think that Mr. Serré covered our problem fairly well. We have a great deal of difficulty with a measure that will put people who are in the same environment, in the same region, in 2 classes, those who deserve and those who are undeserving. And this is not a fault that we have to pay for. It's rather a result of economic conditions. and a great deal of frustration will be raised. I warn you that people who imagine they have the right to get benefits and who won't get them will be calling you. I'll guarantee you, they will call you. And I work with the unions, and when my members expect something and they don't get it, they tell us about it. We in Quebec, as I said, what we've seen these past years is a great deal of job loss, 125,000 persons in manufacturing, and many temporary layoffs, which will influence the eligibility to the problem that you're now trying to build. This is a concern to us, and we'd like to have better figures, but we don't have them. So this is something that really is puzzling for us. There's a figure on the 125,000 potential recipientaries of benefits. And in this architecture that puts Revenue Canada and human resources together, we've always been told that it's difficult, and now we believe it is. There are also problems in managing the system, and you should not minimize what these problems could be. We also have some problems. If it's really through legislation that this process is going to be useful, we'd like you to consider statements as amendments and that you deal with them appropriately. Otherwise, we wonder why shouldn't we just go through a pilot project, which might be much easier, and you could help people tomorrow morning. Let me conclude now. Simply, if you have questions, and I'll be glad to answer them. Thank you.
We're now going to move to Mr. Reid and Mr. Rochelot. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président et membres.
Afternoon. I'm Jean-Claude Rochelot. I'm the president of the local in Montreal, and as a matter of disclosure, I'm also the NDP candidate in the current by-election in Hochelaga-Maisonneuve. With me are Brent Reid, Vice President of CEP Local 630 at the Catalyst Paper Mill in Campbell River, BC, and Guy Caron. So I thank you for inviting me. Let me tell you that our organization supports Bill C-50 as a measure that will provide, and that will explain why. It is a measure that will provide to help to tens of thousands of Canadians who have been hit with the current economic crisis. To give you a sense of this urgency, the current terms of the bill would likely exclude 1,100 workers of the Abitibi-Water Grand Falls Windsor mill if not implemented by the end of November, if it does not get royal assent before the end of November. We were informed that an amendment would be tabled to maintain the 4th of January date for benefits, and we encourage you to adopt that. Despite our support for adopting this bill, Bill C-50 will not be confused as the real reform that the employment insurance needs at this point. It is merely a stopgap that is simply better than the status quo. I have 3 points to raise. About 190,000 workers will qualify, and for extended EI benefits in the next 2 years. This extension, which varies from 5 to 20 weeks, will allow the workers to extend their benefits, and this is the only reason why CEP is supporting this bill. Some workers will be helped more than others, but it's still better than the status quo. It is not a step towards a real reform. And as a negotiator in my everyday work. I believe things should be taken in small steps, take what's on the table and continue working step by step to improve the system. The workers I represent in the Montreal refinery could close very soon because the government is letting the refining industry go south to the United States, and our refineries are closing down. And many of our members become unemployed. And this also applies to many employees in the Montreal region that are hit hard by the economic downturn. Some workers need this help, and we hope that we'll see other changes coming up. I'll let my colleague continue with this part.
Side. Concerns around the many workers that this bill misses. For one, the 500 Can West workers laid off in November, and the others before them. Bill C-50 in its current form, there are some situations that arise. At Catalyst Paper in Campbell River, there's a 3-phase closure. Sawmill in the spring, pulp mill in November, and the paper mill probably this February. These people all work together. This bill will cover less than half of them. That's a concern for the people that I represent and the community that I live in. The other concern is that the people that are best protected with the most severance, with those kinds of contractual obligations behind them, will get the most benefit. The people with the least amount have the least protection. Will run out of time and won't be able to push past. If you're shut down in November and you don't have enough severance to take you through till January 4th, you'll be excluded. All of the people from the spring in the sawmill will be excluded. The conditions set out to claim the extended benefit are way too numerous. And again, in pushing employees that are at the most risk of production and curtailments outside of the scope. Thank you.
And thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Il y a aussi un côté qui est un petit peu plus sombre à cette partie du projet de loi, c'est que de toute évidence, il ne s'agit pas d'une réforme et toute tentative de décrire cette initiative ainsi devrait être sérieusement blâmée. Une véritable réforme.
A real reform would have included the 1.4 million of unemployed workers who have been left on the wayside. We seem to have lost sight of the fact that employment insurance is an insurance. The basis of the system is still that workers and employers pay premiums to get insured against the risk of losing their job. This is the theory. Over the years, the system has been tinkered with to make it more difficult to access, especially by seasonal workers and by people dismissed with cause who decided to leave. The main rationale was that in times of lower unemployment, there are many jobs for the taking, and EI benefits are not warranted in these cases. This is not the case now, with a very high rate of unemployment, and people who have to relocate cannot do this during the periods where there are more jobs, and we need more help to extend these periods to help people get through the crisis and to be able to, in some near future, to find another job. What Bill C-50 does is to give some hope for 1 in 9 workers currently drawing EI benefits and buy them some time to either get back on their feet or so that they can see their plant or their mill or their company restart their activities. This is why we, along with the CEP, support Bill C-50 and ask for it to be adopted as quickly as possible. We certainly hope this will be a mere first step towards a real reform that the EI system badly needs to help millions of workers who need this very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. We're now going to move over to Mr. Kelly and Ms. Pullman. So the floor is yours. 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to present the perspective of small business on EI and Bill C-50. I'm going to walk you through a slide deck which you should have in front of you right now, and my colleague Dan Kelly will help in answering the question period when we get to that portion of the meeting. First, a little bit about CFIB. We represent more than 105,000 independently owned and operated businesses across Canada, all of which are small and medium-sized companies. They collectively employ 1.25 million Canadians, and they account for $75 billion in GDP. Our members come from every region of the country and every sector of the economy. Most people do not realize how big small business has become in Canada. Slide 3 shows that 98% of all businesses in Canada have fewer than 50 employees. They employ about 55% of Canadians and represent 45% of Canada's GDP. They have also been responsible for the bulk of net new jobs in our economy, and this is especially true during more difficult economic periods. Speaking of more difficult economic periods, the last year has not been easy for many, and small businesses are really no exception to this. CFIB produces a monthly business barometer which tracks our members' business expectations along with a number of other economic factors. Our most recent index, which was released on October 7th, is on slide 4 and shows that SME's outlook dipped quite dramatically during the latter part of last year and earlier this year, but has been picking up since April, and this upward trend has continued into September, leading us to suggest that the economy is making its first tentative steps towards recovery. The good news on slide 5 is that the level of optimism is up right across the country, and for the first time in many years, it's our members in Ontario who are leading the country on this measure. On the next slide, you will see that the manufacturing sector is also among the most optimistic sectors looking forward, leading us to believe that those manufacturers that have been able to adjust and survive the downturn of the last few years are starting to come out the other end with renewed hope and optimism. However, as you can see on the next slide, while optimism is growing, hiring plans remain on hold for now, as 16% plan to increase full-time employment and 13% plan to decrease it. Now, these results are not unusual during times of economic recovery, as employment plans tend to lag behind economic growth. As employment growth is essential to the recovery of the real economy, we must be very cautious of decisions that may end up deterring job creation. We are concerned that some of the decisions being made with respect to EI may end up doing just that. But first, I'd like to give you a very quick glimpse of a report on small business perspective on EI. You have a copy of that report. It's called Ensuring Prosperity, which goes into quite a bit of detail, but a variety of issues related to EI. I'm just going to focus on a couple here that are relevant to this discussion. First, CFIB research found that the smaller the firm, the less likely are they to lay people off. So while small business employers may not yet be starting to hire in great numbers coming out of a recession, they are also more likely to have held on to their people as long as they possibly could, which is the reason why we have not seen a large increase in the percentage of small firms planning to decrease employment since the recession began. This has been validated by other research showing that employment at larger companies has dropped by 10% in the first half of this year, but was virtually unchanged among smaller firms. In fact, we know of employers who have foregone their own income to ensure that their employees continue to get paid during these more difficult economic times. What small businesses provide to employees is stability and personal relationships, which is often not the case at larger firms. Secondly, from the report, it was very clear from the survey results that small business owners support the fundamental principles of EI, which is to provide short-term financial assistance to workers between jobs, and for the most part, they were relatively satisfied with the regular benefits side of the program. For example, as seen on slide 9, when asked how the system could be modified to meet the needs of their business, the largest group would rather see no changes to the current benefit levels or current qualifying periods. In fact, a majority want no change or less generous benefit levels or qualifying periods. So instead of making changes to the benefit sides of the system, CFIB strongly believes that the most effective way to assist long-tenured workers is to help them get trained and back to work as soon as possible. Another report we did last May, which was entitled Canada's Training Ground, SME's $18 billion investment in the nation's workforce, found that when you calculate the costs associated with formal and informal training, smaller companies actually invest more in training per employee than larger companies. And this is illustrated in detail on the next slide, slide 10. Combine this with the fact that organizations such as the OECD have found that the most effective means of helping people get back to work is to provide on-the-job training incentives. We believe that providing an EI training credit to small employers would be a much better investment of EI training dollars and would likely go a long way in helping to create job and training opportunities for many long-tenured workers. But our biggest concern with this bill and with EI system overall is the additional costs that are being added to the EI program, which will result in skyrocketing EI premium rates just as we're coming out of recession. First, as you can see on the next slide, slide 11, small businesses themselves have identified payroll taxes as having the biggest effect on the growth of their business, because when you increase the cost of payroll taxes like EI, you discourage hiring and fewer jobs are created. So what kind of increases are we talking about? The current EI rate freeze, which is in effect until the end of 2010, has been a very welcome policy, as it has allowed many business owners to hold on to their people. Most analysts, CFPB included, do not expect the unemployment rate to have fallen to 6.5% by 2011, which is the rate at which the EI premium rate freeze was set. So the rate will have to go up in 2011 to compensate for whatever the difference in unemployment rates will be at that time. However, it has become clear that the government also plans to charge back the 2-year EI rate freeze to the EI account, which would require the new Canada Employment Insurance Financing Board, the CEIFB, to pay back an additional $10 to $13 billion to the government with interest. And the only way they can do that is through increasing EI premiums. As they are limited to an annual increase of 15 cents for employees and 21 cents for employers, we foresee maximum premium rate increases for both employers and employees for many years to come, as illustrated on slide 12. By passing Bill C-50, yet another $935 million will be added to the total amount that the CEIFB will be expected to pay back through the premium rate increases for several years to come. Turning to the next slide, you will see what this might mean for an employer or an employee. Taking the most pessimistic scenario, which is also the most likely scenario given what we currently know, we expect that between 2011 and 2015, EI premiums will increase by 65%. This will ultimately discourage job creation at the worst time, as the economy will be just starting to emerge from its employment slump. So ironically, the $935 million to help long-tenure workers with additional benefits may end up contributing to making their job prospects worse, as employers watch the cost of hiring go up and the take-home pay of their employees go down. What makes this whole scenario even more frustrating is that there has been a $57 billion surplus accumulated in EI account from 1994 to 2008, as shown on the next slide. We would have no objection to government requiring the CEIFB to pay for the additional EI costs as a result of the current recession if they would repay the $57 billion surplus first. Instead, the new CEIFB was provided $2 billion as an initial reserve, which, given the scenario I have just described, will be easily wiped out in the first year. We strongly believe that the federal government has a moral obligation to pay back the surplus accumulated from employers and employees by absorbing additional costs and maintaining a premium rate freeze until the $57 billion has been paid back. We believe, in conclusion, that no real discussion about Bill C-50 can take place without understanding the much broader fiscal issues related to EI and dealing with them as well. In conclusion, we suggest that the EI premium rate freeze be maintained beyond 2010 to ensure future job creation is not harmed by payroll tax increases, that the CEIFB be properly funded to withstand recessions and additional costs by repaying the $57 billion surplus over time. With its target of assisting long-tenure workers, Bill C-50 is more acceptable than other measures that have been suggested to enhance EI benefits. However, we remain very concerned that these kinds of selective measures are unlikely to result in the successful restructuring of the program and will likely only harm the overall financial balance of the system. And finally, we encourage the government to think about creating an EI training credit that encourages hiring and workplace training as an alternative means of assisting long-tenured workers and others on EI so that they can get effective training and have better access to the new jobs that are being created. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Bowman. Mr. Kelly. We're going to move over to Mr. Casey now. 7 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee, for this invitation today to appear before your committee and contribute to your discussions on Bill C-50. By way of brief introduction, I am here on behalf of the members of the Forest Products Association of Canada. We're the national trade association that represents the large majority of production of Canada's forest products in the form of lumber, pulp, and paper. The industry more broadly is an industry that represents about 11% of Canada's manufacturing GDP. We employ 273,000 workers directly across this country, another 500,000 or so indirect employees. If you add that on to, so it comes up to somewhere around 700,000 people. We are the mainstay of about 300 communities from coast to coast in every region of this country.
I'm sure that the members of the committee know that the forestry industry in Canada is facing a major crisis. I'm sure that the MPs have had the opportunity to notice that we're not talking about loss of jobs or people losing their jobs, but also the destruction of communities. The subject that we're concerned with is not only registered job loss, but it's the entire integrity of society in rural Canada.
Experiencing is cause for deep concern, and I think yesterday's debate in the House of Commons serves as a good example of the level of passion on all sides of the House of Commons about this issue. I would like to at least put on record today that we foresee strong markets coming back for the industry in the not-so-distant future. We have traditional markets that are going to come back, and we also have new and emerging markets that are going to come back for the industry, and we're prepared to take advantage of those markets when they do come back into play. Until that time, we've obviously got a number of challenges ahead of us. First, we've got to survive until those markets do come back. Second of all, we've got to be as competitive as possible so that when the markets do come back, we are going to be able to compete. When those markets do come back, we're going to be looking at competition that is fiercer and stronger than it was ever before. The good news is that the Canadian industry hasn't been alone in being hit by this recession. Our competitors have been hit too, whether it's Brazil, whether it's Russia, whether it's Europe. Each and every one of them has been facing their own set of challenges that's put them at a sort of a same playing level as the Canadian industry is at right now. Je suis certain que vous vous demandez ce que le gouvernement peut faire. Nous savons.
I'm sure that you're wondering what the government can do. We know that we must do in the industry, and we're doing it. But what can the government do?
Well, one thing is for certain, government cannot bring markets back up to the levels where they need to be for us. And that's the first thing that's got to happen for this industry, is people have to start buying lumber and people have to start buying paper again. Government cannot do that for the industry. That's the biggest thing that's facing the industry right now. As I said earlier, those markets will come back. However, there is a fundamental role that government can do right now, and that is establishing the policy conditions here domestically that will enhance our competitiveness in competing not only now but also when those markets do come back. Things such as tax policy, providing for a competitive rail system, investing in the green energy and bioeconomy right now are certainly a number of things at the government's disposal that they should be pursuing immediately, and that will set us up, not only this industry, but for the country more broadly. Our industry, our markets will rebound. We know that the U.S. is going to start building houses again. We know that the markets of China and India are going to come back. We're already the leading exporter into the Chinese market. We're the third largest Canadian exporter into the Indian market. We're well positioned. We look forward to taking advantage of those marketplaces again once they come back. In the short term, there are certainly some key challenges, and I think one of the main things we're certainly worried about right now in this current economic recession is the loss of employees. Forestry jobs are highly skilled jobs. We cannot simply replace those with anybody just off the street. Our big concern right now is in a time like this, people go and look for jobs elsewhere. The changes that are incorporated in the Bill C-50 and also other changes to the AI program that came out of the budget of 2009 go a long way to helping the industry retain its employees. This particular bill is one measure, but also the work-share program changes that were brought in through the budget are enormously helpful. And with the committee's indulgence, I would just like to draw the committee's attention to one tiny change, or at least an area of interest for that we hope the committee will find the opportunity to look into a little bit further going down the road on the work-share side of things. At the moment, sorry, let me just backtrack a little bit. Prior to the work-share program announcements being enhanced, a number of companies were already taking advantage of the program. Those members received a top-up to their existing agreement and immediately qualified for a new 52-week agreement at the conclusion of their existing agreements without a cooling-off period. Other companies that were relatively healthy at the turn of 2008 and were not in the program started their clock when the program began. Their benefits will conclude at the end of their 52 weeks. They will be subject to a 26-week cooling-off period. Right now, we don't see the market sort of returning for another year or so. A lot of those companies are going to be facing a 26-week waiting period to get back onto the work-share program. We'd like to see the government take a long, hard look at that to see if there's a way that we can eliminate the 26-week waiting period. Ultimately, we think that this will be a benefit to the government as it will be less costly at the end of the day. Ultimately, as grateful as the industry is for these programs, like most insurance policies, we would prefer that our employees not have to avail themselves to the program. We would much rather keep the mills running and keep the employees gainfully employed in the towns that they were either raised in or have grown to be members of those communities over time. Continuing to focus on providing the industry with a competitive domestic policy framework should continue to be a strong objective for governments at all levels. Again, on behalf of the Forest Products Association of Canada and our members, I thank the committee for this time, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have.
And thank you, Mr. Casey. We're now going to move over to Ms. Yalnizyan. The floor is yours, 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is Canada's leading progressive think tank, supported by over 10,000 individual and institutional members across the country, with offices in Ottawa, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Regina, and Halifax. Thank you very much for inviting our views on Bill C-50. No recession since the Second World War has destroyed as many jobs in the opening months of a downturn. The government was very quick to react with supports for the financial sector, but improvements to EI have been long overdue and woefully inadequate. This, despite a clear action plan for EI reform tabled by this very committee on February the 15th, 2005, and later, in 2007, all-party agreement on 2 readings of Bill C-269 before the government of the day, this government, then decided to deny royal recommendation in November of 2007. So long before the meltdown of global financial capital began last fall, we knew our system of unemployment insurance was not recession-ready. Between October 2008 and last month, the labour market shed 483,000 full-time job opportunities. More than 1.5 million Canadians today are actively looking for paid work. Over half of them do not receive EI. That means 750,000 Canadians are left twisting in the wind. Canadians have not been this exposed to the risks of the economic risks of joblessness since the 1940s, when we first put EI into place, unemployment insurance into place. Now, I'm not telling you anything new that you don't know. I'm not telling you anything radical. For years, your very own committee has noted the need to improve access to the system by reducing and making more uniform the eligibility criteria based on hours, to improve the duration of benefits, which were precipitously cut back in the reforms of the early 1990s, and to improve the rate of income replacement, which is particularly disastrous for low-income workers. Bill C-50 was this government's response to these concerns. It limits itself solely to the issue of duration and further limits the extension of benefits to a small subgroup of the unemployed. HRSDC gave testimony to the Senate Standing Committee on National Finance just a couple of weeks ago, and they stated that 1/3 of those displaced since January of 2009 could benefit from this legislation. That means 2/3 of those displaced since January 2009 and who have exhausted their benefits, the majority of Canadians who are in that position, will not receive any help. Bill C-50 also ignores all of those who lost their jobs, who were the shock troops of the opening months of this recession. So how many people are we talking about? Monthly unemployment figures by Statistics Canada show that unemployment swelled by at least 200,000 people last fall and a further 300,000 people since January. Improvements to EI, need I say, are critical. Canada cannot have a full recovery if workers face rollbacks in wages, benefits and pension provisions, and the unemployed also cannot find new jobs at roughly comparable wages. Aggregate demand will just continue to fall. The United States are 22 long months into recession with no clear end in sight. We will have to wait an awfully long time to ride on their coattails. So diminishing purchasing power of Canadians is an issue this government, this committee needs to deal with, because this is a very fragile recovery and this issue can no longer be ignored. I will limit myself to comments about Bill C-50, though we understand that it only deals with one aspect of the improvements we are all seeking to the unemployment insurance system. Bill C-50 can be made more effective with 3 simple modifications that address 3 questions. When should the clock start ticking? Who should get help? And how much help should they get? First, the effective date for Bill C-50 should be changed to start at January the 4th, 2008, rather than January the 4th, 2009. Some may ask, why reach so far back? Simply because January 4th, 2008 is exactly what the government's thinking was in Bill C-10, passed not very long ago, which included measures to extend benefits by 5 weeks for all those who had exhausted their benefits. Moving the trigger date to January the 4th, 2008 would extend benefits provided in Bill C-50 to the same group as C-10, everyone affected by the recession.
Secondly, Bill C-50 should drop the rule that excludes workers who may have been drawing up to 35 weeks of benefits in the last 5 years. As you have heard, it is nonsense to say that in these type of economic times, some unemployed are more deserving of help than others. The majority of people first affected by the downturn were in goods-producing industries. Such industries commonly retool, adjust inventory, experience slowdowns in demand or supply, and all of this can lead to temporary layoffs and shutdowns periodically. Workers in such industries have zero control over their hours of work. People who have been laid off on a regular basis in the previous 5 years may not find themselves not being recalled at all. These people should not be excluded from what Bill C-50 offers. No such limitation was placed on Bill C-10. Finally, how much help does Bill C-50 provide? Unlike Bill C-10, which provided an additional 5 weeks of benefits to all unemployed Canadians that had exhausted their benefits, Bill C-50 proposes this Baroque set of eligibility criteria that is extraordinarily difficult to read through. Within the small group of unemployed who are who are the target of Bill C-50, the bill further creates 6 different categories of winners, where the amount of help they will get is based on how much they've contributed to the system in the past 15 years, up to a maximum of 20 years for a select few. Extension of benefits should be uniform, as in Bill C-10, and Bill C-50 should offer a significant extension for all who need it, 20 additional weeks. Does this sound overly generous to you? Well, let's compare this to just 2 weeks ago in the United States. The Associated Press reported, and I quote, "Congress has added up to 53 extra weeks of benefits on top of the 26 typically provided by the states. The House this week approved legislation that would add a further 13 weeks to high unemployment states." Let's be very clear. Without significant extension of benefits, you can be sure that a huge proportion of the costs are going to fall on provincial shoulders. Last summer, British Columbia's Premier Campbell suggested extending benefits to 2 years, and Saskatchewan's Premier Wall also stressed the need for more benefits. These are not socialist politicians. But these premiers know very well that they are going to end up picking up the tab for the federal government's unwillingness to act. Without significant changes to Bill C-50, this government risks being a spectator to what may be the most significant period of asset stripping of the middle class in generations, exactly what unemployment insurance was designed to prevent. Recovery or no, Canadians are coping with unbelievable economic stress. Your predecessors from decades ago created a system that improved life for Canadians in good times and bad. I urge you to consider today how you can take on that mantle. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Yan. We're now going to start with our first round, which will be 7 minutes. I'm going to start over on my left with my Liberal colleague, Mr. Savage. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you all for taking the time to come out and help us in our study on this bill. This is it's a difficult bill to deal with. This one, I think. This is a bill that divides Canadians, as a number of you have pointed out, into those who are deserving and hardworking and those who the government seems to think aren't. I mean, the minister refers to hardworking Canadians, deserving Canadians, which by implication means that others aren't. It further, as Ms. Yesere pointed out, it further complicates the EI system, which isn't simple to begin with. There's nothing here for many long-tenured workers. There's nothing here for people who lost their job last fall out of luck. There's nothing here for seasonal workers, part-time workers, those who have frequent interruptions in their work. It does help on the positive side some long-tenured workers who need help like everybody else does. But the range of opinion that we have here, and I think has been consistent with the other hearings that we've had, is we have some people who are saying this is a bad bill, it has to be defeated. We have others who are saying it's an imperfect bill, but you've got to take what you can get, hardly an endorsement. And then we have other witnesses here today who presented on EI without really putting forward a position on this specific bill. So that's what we're faced with. We're faced with looking at a bill that will help some people, but that is discriminatory, that seems to ignore the real needs of reform in the EI system. For a number of years, we've had private members' bills and opposition day motions that address the EI issue. In March, we all supported on the opposition an NDP opposition day motion on EI on March the 5th, which called for an elimination of the 2-week waiting period a national standard of 360 hours for eligibility, raising the benefits from 55% to 60%, the best 12 weeks divisor rule. It talked about training, it talked about the self-employed. It didn't talk about an extension of benefits. It wasn't one of the priorities in March to further extend the benefits. We have, I think, 11 recommendations from CFIB today, none of which refer to an extension of benefits. So we have a bill that seems to have the support of those who say, well, it's better than nothing, and we take it and keep going. But does anybody really think that we're going to get more from this government on EI? That's the difficult question that we have to face. So I guess my question is to any one of you, perhaps starting with Ms. Yelnesian and working across, is this the best way that we can reform EI right now? Is this what the system needs more than anything else?
I think the answer to that question, Mr. Savage, is if the government would be willing to work with you to improve this piece of legislation to actually help more people, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. The other shoe of the recession may fall, but you know, it looks like politically speaking this bill is going to pass, and the job is not done. The job is far from done.
Mr. Casey?
I mean, you know, I can't speak to the specifics of the bill from a technical standpoint, but certainly when you combine it with some of the other changes to the EI program, like the work-share program, those are going to be enormously helpful to our industry and to our sector. So anything that helps keep employees in the towns that they're already working in, or keep them in, or at least in the area so they don't move elsewhere, is going to help us when we do rebound, as I said earlier on.
So you think this is the single best improvement we can make to EI right now? This is the only thing we can control right now?
Well, no, is this the single biggest? I don't know. I couldn't tell you what would be the most single biggest improvement.
Ms. Pullman or Mr. Kelly?
Yes, no, I don't think that this is the best way to reform employment insurance. In fact, as we outlined earlier, our concern is that the costs of this are going to make job creation and getting the economy back on track more difficult by adding additional costs to the system. The changes that were made in the January budget, I think, were more preferable and were ones that were more favorable to small firms. The extension of benefits for all workers, the changes to the work-sharing program. These are some of the changes that we, in fact, liked more than the changes in this bill, particularly in that the government had agreed to pay for those out of general revenue, as opposed to calling back the fund to pay for it, as this bill will do.
Thank you. Mr. Reid or Mr. Rocheleau?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to ask, but I've learned in this last little while, when something's on the table, you can't leave it. So, you know, we're urging you from our union's perspective to help the people that it does help, and then move on to help the people that you need to help.
I understand, but as I addressed before, we have to look at this bill right now in terms of whether we can support this. And we're looking at this one single measure. Is this the best? I think you're suggesting in your brief that it wasn't, but I'll give you a chance to change that. You don't have to look at Mr. Godin for okay on that, I'm sorry.
I didn't say that this was the best way to help the workers. What was put on the table, it's there for helping them immediately. And in case people don't know, some people need help right now. Not in 6 months, not in 8 months. They need help right now, immediately. So this is what's on the table now. It is far from being enough. And I also mentioned this in my presentation. Other reforms must come about very quickly to improve the system. But this is on the table right now, so we take what's on the table. But this is your job to present other improvements to help the people who are suffering now and who wonder what they're going to do with their house, with their family, and how they organize their lives.
Did you support the budget in January, which also provided not enough, but some help and considerably more than is here? Would you have voted for the budget in January, which provided 5 extra weeks for everybody on EI as well as training and...
Ça, c'est... je répondrai pas à une question piège parce que j'étais pas...
I'm not going to put you a question to try to trap you. And I won't answer this. I haven't gotten into the details of this. I'm not going to get into details of the budget.
Monsieur Lelébété?
Non. Non.
Well, this is insufficient as a reform. And it's actually a scandal that we should be put in a position where we have to say yes to a reform that is based on discriminatory principles, that doesn't reach the objectives that we should have set as a government. And I don't agree. I think that the approach was deviated right from the start. No.
Savage, we're going to get back to the Liberals in the second round. Mr. Lessard, sir, the floor is yours. 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je veux aussi remercier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also thank our guests this afternoon for shedding light on this situation. I want to thank Ms. Yalnizian. Note that her Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives always gives us some clarification that helps a great deal, at least personally. This helps me very much to evaluate the project. I would like to put a few questions. The Forest Products Association of Canada, how many members do you represent, Mr. Casey? I think you said, but 22 members. But that's a majority of production. You said that you also cover 75% of forestry that's operative here in Canada. Yes, exactly. So I understand that you're working on a section-by-section basis to cover the various regions of Canada, and it's on a provincial basis. Am I right? We don't get into the provincial relations. It's a national organization. Do you have members in Quebec? Answer yes. Abitibi-Bowater, Tembec, etc. Question, do they agree or disagree with the bill? They agree with our position. Do they agree with the bill? Our position on the bill, as I already said, yes, we agree with it. The forest industry of Quebec, are you aware? I'm not going to speak for Mr. Chevrette. It's another industry. But I think that they do agree. Do you agree that the industry represented by Mr. Chevrette that covers all of Quebec is very representative? Mr. Chevrette and other members who are not members of our association. So you know that they're against. Answer. Yes, I know that. Question, so you're aware that in this bill there is a gap between the position of Canada and forestry in Quebec? Answer, not in my opinion. There are members. But after what we just observed, clarifies matters very much. I find the arguments of our friends very interesting. The Canadian Communications, Energy and Paper Workers Union of Canada. I understand that you work in a refinery, a Shell refinery. How many people work in the Shell refinery? We had 350 union workers. You have a collective agreement. Answer, yes. Question, am I wrong in saying that people get laid off according to seniority? Answer, yes. Question, has there been any layoffs in Shell over the past 5 years? Answer, no. So these are stable jobs. Answer, yes, when there is no crisis such as the one now. Question, when there will be people laid off, the last ones to come in will be the first to go? Answer, this means of what will happen, and from what we know and what we're worried about is that if we close down the refinery, we'll all be out of a job, all 350 of us. And you project this for what date? Question, you should ask the company to tell you when they're going to do that, but we know that since this summer, they suspended the sword of Damocles over our head, and I can't really answer for the date. Question, the exercise we're going through with you today, and this helps us in clarification. I don't want to try to trap you with questions. You have a very good overview of the union environment. We want to find which workers are targeted by this bill. This afternoon, you made a description. You said that there could be some. And you also said that it would impact 190,000 jobs. And you also said that you're an NDP candidate. So the conservative NDP bill that is before us right now, we put this question to the government, to the officials, to the minister, to the deputy minister, including your NDP colleagues. How do we get the figure of 190,000? You are an NDP candidate, and do you know how we get this result of 190,000? Answer, this could help people, this information that was given. I don't want to interrupt you. We only have 1 minute. I understand that part. You reaffirmed your position, but you also state that there is a figure of 190,000. How do you get that figure? Because you don't just pull figures out of the air. How do you get to this result? With information that you have as Conservatives and NDP? Answer, as I said, there would be about 190,000. Is this an accurate figure? Probably not. Nobody seems to know the true figure. And from all that I've read and what I've seen and tried to understand, all the figures that have been given in this regard, I haven't found anyone who could tell us an accurate number of the people who will be helped by these measures. From what I know, there are people in our region and other local sections of our union who are about to lose their jobs and who will need the help. Question, I understand that, yes. But what do we want to know? What we're looking for, is it true that there's 913 million and perhaps $1 billion? Is that part of the 5 billion? And 190,000 people will be affected. So usually you're very accurate, and based on your habit of accuracy, don't you think that it's kind of arbitrary to give 190,000 as a figure when you're representing members who trust your word, and now you're saying that you're not any more in knowledge than that we are? So I'd like to know why today you're saying that you're for this, for 190,000 people. We have nothing to show why. I was hoping that you'd inform us today, but maybe it's just out of thin air.
Right now we're going to have to move on. That's overtime. I'm going to move to Mr. Godin, sir. 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to welcome our guests. In any case, I hope to the utmost that it's not 190,000, that people should work. That's what we want. Let's be 100,000 or 50,000, but I just want the members to get a job and to get to work. So my question would be, because Mr. Laliberté was saying that this would be like a pilot project. Mr. Serret said the same thing. So it's not as bad if it was a pilot project. Answer. As soon as we're told that there's no way of amending the measures that are now on the table, why should I make a show and a charade out of this? Do a pilot project, let's close the books, and let's go home. The problem with the bill, and these are very concrete problems, you know the program as well as anyone else. It's Mr. Serré, Mr. Liberté. You know that there are 12 bills in the House of Commons, 360 hours, 12 best weeks, and so on. In the preceding government, in June 2005, we had the 12 best weeks, a motion in the House of Commons. The Liberals and the Conservatives voted it down. So that didn't start yesterday. EI reform began in 1990 when they took that money and got it out of the EI system, and this money has been stolen ever since. That's where the money went in 1996. That's when the biggest cuts came to EI. But do you agree with me? Because I could say that the people in the region, what is the highest rate of unemployment, the highest rate of closures of mills and forestry plants, and the caribou mine closed down? Well, we have all those problems in my riding, but each time there's 1,000 or a positive change, except for our 2009 budget. Apart from that, we supported the changes in EI. Do you agree with me? Could I answer, Mr. Godin? I wasn't invited here to speak about the NDP's position. I am here to speak on behalf of our organization regarding Bill C-50. You can vote the way you want to vote. I'm not talking about that. I've come here to tell parliamentarians that obviously the government is not listening. The government did not listen. The very broad historical consensus in Canada for asking for improvements for eligibility. And at the end of July, there was a meeting, there was a unanimous request for improvement in eligibility. This Bill C-50 introduces very pernicious notion of people who deserve and undeserving. How many weeks someone had benefits in the past will have ceilings and on figures that the department does not even have. And this goes back 15 years. This is pernicious, and that's why we're against. But you do agree with me that when we add the 5 weeks, it's only because there was a high unemployment rate in our past pilot projects. Not all Canadians received it, but these were changes to EI with pilot projects. But at the end of the day, workers were not treated equally all over the country. Could the bloc to give some help to my colleague? Could with a minimum of politeness, a pilot project is never amended, and Mr. Liberté said it very clearly. I would like, Mr. Chairman, I haven't finished my time. So, Ms. Corinne Pullman, isn't EI going too far? They're paying 75% of the wages of the employees. And in Denmark, it's 90%. I'd like to understand your organization. So you're saying that Canadians, if they went on unemployment insurance, they'll never go back to work. Could you explain to us what this means?
from our perspective, more of our members, when we did a recent survey and we asked them that exact question, should benefit levels be more generous in employment insurance? And in fact, more of our members, for the most part, said that the current level of benefits were appropriate, so that there wasn't a huge cry for reduction in the benefits. But I will say, more of our members said that EI benefits were too generous than not generous enough. And so we've studied both that question and the question of whether or not there should be.
Did you ever ask them? Did you ever ask them, your client there, that your association, if they were making too much money or not enough money?
No, we haven't asked them that question. No. But I would imagine. But
there's a big difference about a person losing his job and cannot buy the food to put on their fire.
Yes,
and their family.
And as you know, that there are many small businesses that are struggling in this economy as well.
Do you think that they should be transferred to the province when we have an economic crisis the way we have today? Do you think it should be transferred to the province to pay the welfare instead of having a program that the government has already stole $57 billion from it? Should not be that program that it will be paying into it instead?
No, in fact, our members generally accept the basic tenets of employment insurance. That is, if somebody involuntarily loses their job, there should be a system of fair compensation for those circumstances. But I will say that with the growing shortage of labor that has been experienced in Canada right now, we have to be very cautious about making further changes to employment insurance. We would prefer that if there was another $1 billion of money available to us as Canadians, that we would use that additional $1 billion in helping small businesses and other firms create jobs and train their employees rather than extending the time of benefits. That, from our perspective, is the more appropriate use of additional dollars in this fund if they were available. Our bigger concern, of course, is that we are going to prolong the agony, and the costs of this are going to be passed, preventing job creation in future years.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Godin. We're now going to move to the last question of the first round, and we've got Mr. Cannon and Mr. Velcott. I believe you're sharing time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will be sharing my time with my colleague. And I thank you, Mr. Godin, for your passionate intervention, and of course, Mr. Lessard, for your generous offer to work together, because we all can get along together and get by with a little help from our friends. Exactly. Thank you for the presenters here today, and the fact that we are working on Bill C-50. It's an act to increase benefits for long-tenured workers, which is part of our comprehensive suite of our economic action plan. I'm talking about consultation. This is the broadest consultation ever taken for a budget and earliest budget implemented in Canadian history. So the fact that we have extended by 5 weeks our EI program, as has been alluded to, the work-share program, and now dealing with about half of the Canadian workers who have pay EI programs are long-tenured workers, and roughly half of those, or a third of those, who have lost their jobs since the end of January of this year have made an EI claim are long-tenured workers. We've had department officials who have been witnesses previously to the committee and indicated it is about 190,000 unemployed workers who have worked over the years and now in the most vulnerable state that we're addressing this particular bill towards. And we'll continue to monitor the situation as we move forward. I appreciate the CFIB's position. I used to have my own business in support of small business. The SMEs are the economic engine that drive the economy of our country, and we'll continue to work together, the risk takers, the leaders, the entrepreneurs of our communities. And I understand your concern about the $57 billion. As Mr. Godin had said, it's gone, it's disappeared, and we're dealing with the fact that it's whoever spent it. We point fingers till the cows come home. As a matter of fact, we don't have it, so we've got to deal with the present situation and build on a stronger Canada as we move forward. I know that Mr. Reid, I was also at one time a member of the CEP and come from British Columbia. I have the honor of representing the Kelowna Lake Country in the Okanagan, part of beautiful British Columbia, where wood is good, and as you know that forestry is a big economic driver for our province. And as Mr. Casey alluded to, the element of where we're going with this particular bill, a lot of the workers are in the forest industry. So my question would be to Mr. Casey is, we've heard from the Bloc that they feel that this bill will not help the forest industry. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit more how you feel from your members' perspective how C-50 will help the forest workers?
Thank you for the question. I think a starting point would be to just reiterate the fact that the industry still continues to employ 273,000 Canadians directly. We've been at the leading edge of this economic downturn. When the U.S. housing market went down, we were the first ones to feel that pain. So we've been at this for a while, and yet we still employ those people. So it's safe to say that there's a significant number of long-term tenured employees in the industry that are still part of the industry and that would fall within the qualifications of this legislation. We expect that there's going to be some continued economic turmoil. We don't think markets are going to come back for probably another year in our industry. So we would expect also there to be some more mill closures, temporary shutdowns of some sort or another. So in that context, certainly the provisions of this bill for those that are long-tenured employees, we do feel that there is going to be benefit for a number of them in some of the areas where we are going to see some temporary closures. And it will certainly, as I said earlier, greatly help keep them in the communities in which they're already in so that we don't lose them further when we do come back. We want to be able to get back up and running as quickly as possible. We're going to need those highly trained, highly skilled employees to be back in our mills as soon as possible, and we think this will help that.
Thank you, Mr. Casey, and pass the floor.
3 minutes.
Okay. I just have limited time here and sharing my time with a colleague here. I want to address my question to, I guess, Ms. Pullman or Mr. Kelly here, because we've got into this issue of the 45-day work year, or at least implied. So everyone seems to agree that there's difficult time we're in now, and we've been hard hit. We need to help those who've been hard hit by the global recession. Our government is focused on making some smart changes to the EI bill, such as in this bill before us, which provides the additional weeks to long-term workers. But I do want to go right to the question, I guess, Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Pullman. I think I have an answer from what you've said already and from your graphs and so on here, but 3 questions. Does your organization support, the other 3 opposition parties, Liberals, Bloc, and NEP, support a 360-hour, 45-day work year? Does your organization support a 45-day work year? Secondly, how would a 45-day work year affect your members? And then lastly, how would a 45-day work year affect the labor dynamic across the country? So you've got about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to respond to 3 questions.
No, in fact, when we made similar presentation to the Senate committee on the same bill, we said that the changes in this bill are, while we're not excited about them, they are less harmful than some of the other proposals for changes to employment insurance that have been proposed. We are very worried, and in fact have publicly stated that the idea of a 360-hour period for employment insurance across the country would be potentially devastating to many small firms who, even in this economic time, still struggle to find workers. And we have to remember that there are still many businesses that are hungry for workers and yet are unable to find them in many sectors of the economy. So we don't support that. The idea would be extremely harmful to small firms across the country, and when we do come out of this recession would seriously set us back, because even if a temporary measures have been found to be very difficult to get rid of, and our major concern with employment insurance is that these measures would stick around and further exacerbate the shortage of labor when we do come out of the recession.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're now going to move to their second round of questions, which will be 5 minutes for questions and answers. We're going to start over on my left-hand side with Madame Foucault. 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking at the table here. It tells that January to July 2009, the initial applications received and accepted in Quebec was 70.8%. So 30% applications were rejected. This is the figure. When I look at the Atlantic provinces, this figure is a maximum of 69 and a minimum of 59. So there are some who are between 59 and 69, and these are percentages for all of Canada and for the Atlantic provinces. And I think these are very low figures in the Atlantic provinces, precisely because these provinces suffer and have suffered for years from chronic lack of work, and people who are unemployed have a great deal of difficulty finding any kind of job. This is one element. And the second element is that we spoke a great deal of discrimination here this afternoon. We also heard a lot about bills that treat people arbitrarily. But let's be specific. in my opinion, a large part of this population that is not affected by this bill, people who are outside of this 190,000 people, are especially women. Women who already work part-time or who are seasonal workers, and I'm coming back to the figures for the Atlantic provinces, and who are not already compliant with the ideal worker that works full-time 12 months a year. And by the very nature of the kind of work they do, already suffer discrimination. And I don't think the government wants to discriminate against women, but the consequences of this bill is obvious discrimination against certain types of workers, and especially women. And at least two people I'd like to hear about this. Of course, I'd like to hear Ms. Yalnizian and also Mr. Seri and Mr. Laliberté. I'd like to hear what you have to say about what I just said.
For the question. We know that this recession has been dubbed in both the United States and in Canada as a he session. 71% of people that lost their jobs in this country thus far have been men, and women are part of the she-covery because they're the ones, particularly women over 55, that are picking up whatever jobs out there to support and sustain family incomes. So we know that already those who are able to access unemployment insurance are primarily men, generally speaking, even in good times, and in this recession even more so. It has been a male-dominated process to make use of the unemployment insurance system. As well it might, because it's the goods-producing industries that were hardest hit in the recession. That does leave us with two issues. There are always people that are in the service industries that are going to get hit, and hit very badly. And in Canada has a very poor track record of low-wage employment for women, as well as insecure and precarious hours. I did have a recommendation, which I didn't make in my opening pitch, that I would like to raise right now, and I will be doing so in front of the Finance Committee in pre-budget consultations next week. And that is one other consideration that this committee could undertake should you wish to make things a little bit more secure for people that are really struggling. And it is outside of the purview of Bill C-50. A lot of women cannot survive on 55% of whatever it is that they were working on. It just isn't enough to pay the bills. And there was one clause introduced in 1996 to the EI Act that permitted some relief for low-income families that are in receipt of the Canada Child Tax Benefit. So for families with net incomes, including the CCTB, of not more than $25,921, there was a clause in the EI Act that would permit up to 80% of income replacement, which means that women that get laid off could at least come close to paying the food, paying the rent, and feeding their kids. And that is primarily who uses this provision. In 1999, about 11.5% of EI recipients made use of this clause. By last year, only 7% did. By raising that threshold in a different amendment to the legislation, which I would highly urge this committee to look at doing, you could actually relieve an awful lot of vulnerability. But I do want to make one other comment, if you will, Madame Falco. I wonder if this committee realizes that in the recession of the 1990s, the eligibility trigger, if you convert the weeks to hours, in an area of 8 to 9% unemployment, it only took 165 hours to trigger EI eligibility. In the recession of the 1990s, it took 255 hours. Today, it takes 595 hours. For people to think that if you reduce the hours of work eligibility, so that because you're worried that there's malingerers in the system, I would remind you that the economy exploded in 1989, and after the recession of the 1990s, we had 10 of the most sustained years of economic expansion. It wasn't because of the eligibility requirements for EI. We have got an enormous economic storm unfolding, and we can do better.
Thank you. That's all the time. We're actually over time. So we're going to move now to Mr. Lobb, sir. 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And to the people here today that are representing the organized labor, my heart goes out to you for those jobs that have been lost. My early part of my career, I worked in the CAW union, and so I know that it's very difficult for union leadership and representation to have to go through these losses. It's stressful for your workers, and it's also stressful for yourselves. Just one observation to a point Mr. Lessard made towards Mr. Rochelot, whether or not he had a collective agreement within his union shop. I would suggest he likely wouldn't be the president very long if he didn't have a collective agreement. So that was kind of an interesting comment from there. When we talk about helping people, I can think of hundreds of employees, hundreds of currently laid off employees in my riding that this bill would directly benefit, and that's why we'll be voting for this benefit. The numbers have been 190,000 workers, that number has been used. With Mr. Savage and Mr. Lessard, with their actions, they're going to help zero by voting against this bill. So that's unfortunate to see that for sure. And just one other point, I've heard reform many times about this bill. This is a bill to amend, so just clear for that to be on the record. The question directly is for the CFIB, and it's looking forward. You know, be it as it may, what the past is, looking forward, looking to the future. Would you agree that the initiatives undertaken to balance the premiums, to invest those premiums back into employment insurance, is that, in your opinion, looking forward, a move that you would support, that you think is a good move?
It depends on which aspect you're speaking of. The budget measures that were put in place in January that paid for the additional benefits during the recession out of general revenues, we absolutely do support. It was a contribution back from the $57 billion surplus that was taken out of the account. This measure, though,
specifically around the Employment Insurance Board, the act of balancing revenues and expenses.
Yes, the measures that were the creation of the CIFB was a terrific measure, one that we had pushed for years and years. Had it been done a decade ago, we would be in much better shape because the surplus dollars would have been invested in a fund that we could then draw on in this difficult economic time. Instead, that money was pulled into general revenues, is now not available for us in weaker economic times. And but the challenge with this is the timing. The creation of the board was excellent. It was the right public policy move, and all MPs that support it, I think, are to be congratulated. The challenge of it, though, is the creation of it at this particular point in time means that all of the surplus dollars that have been taken out of the fund in the past are gone, and now the fund is going to be stuck with the deficits. And so we feel that that is incredibly unfair. That it's fine, as my colleague Corinne Pullman noted, for the EI fund to be called on to pay for these additional benefits at this particular point in time if it was also given some of the surplus dollars. And if you're not going to refund the entire $57 billion surplus, we do feel that the government has a moral obligation to at least ensure that the new fund has enough money to ride out recessionary times. $10 to $15 billion would be a good start.
On that question, I take it from you then, ensuring that you have a rate-setting mechanism that ensures that the premiums do not go into general revenue is something that you accept as a good policy step. And certainly using the surplus for general revenues as happened in the previous Liberal government is not something you'd like to see happening, and that's fair. But when I look at your chart and some of your diagrams there, the various parties, the NDP, the Bloc, and the Liberals have suggested that there be more generous levels of benefits than we now propose, and that the qualifying periods would be more generous. And we've heard witnesses today suggest that. But given what we now have, to do either of those would either increase the deficit or tack on more money to premiums, which would be, as you say, harmful to employers and employees alike. Do I take it your group opposes both those avenues?
Yes, in fact,
Just a quick response, because we're out of time. But Mr. Kelly, quick response.
Yeah, we do. When we did our survey, and you've got copies of this report, the majority of our members were strongly opposed, were either in favor of the current system of benefits or perhaps less generous benefits. There were a small sliver that were in favor of increasing EI benefits, but by a very, very small margin. So the hours of eligibility and the benefit levels we urge you not to touch. The measures that are in this bill, while not our favorite, are less worrisome than some of the other measures that have been proposed.
Thank you very much. We're going to now move over to Madame Boudin. You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for being here. 2 weeks ago, I put this question to the Minister because we met the officials regarding this bill, and I have the question, why didn't they help career transition with a pilot project as new measures in Bill C-50? I didn't get a very precise answer, because this is a way of playing politics at the expense of the unemployed, because a pilot project would have had no amendments and no decisions to make. And this creates two categories, the good and bad unemployed. And this is unjust because we're adopting unfair measures. I wonder if there's social justice if we separate our group here in this room and if we decide to save those who have glasses, who wear glasses, and giving them the food to eat, although we're all starving to death. Would this be any kind of social justice? So we're going through an economic crisis, and the government wanted to make a temporary measure with C-50. We're going through a difficult pass, and there's already some things coming back into place. What would your priorities be? And the minister told us last time that she'd consulted many specialists. Did they, yes or no, consult you briefly? Did you get consulted on Bill C-50? No. So I put this question. I think that you should have been consulted. What would you have given priority to as measures in an economic crisis to help workers to make it as accessible as possible? We just said this a minute ago. I think that accessibility is the first priority. Pierre Serret said that there is a consensus except in the Parliament. Number one. Number two, the extension of the period. We're going through a recession. These are temporary measures, but we have our needs. And in style of the 5 weeks, 5 extra weeks, we could continue in that way and to follow the situation, because OEDC says that it's going to continue, and we have every reason to believe them. It will continue. And another measure that's mentioned by Mr. Casey is job sharing. He stated the problem very well. In Quebec, we have about 22,000 people in job sharing, 50,000 people in Canada. This is a huge figure. And these people come in, most of them, in a few months. This is temporary, and this is a good measure, as Mr. Casey said, keeps people on the job. And this is a way of going about it, and we're for that. But if the government intends here to say that we'll help workers who've been long tenured, I'd rather have a specific problem for these workers in bad times, and we talked about professional training. And let's not try to do this with a Byzantine system of EI that not only misses the target, but also creates obvious unfairness. And we spoke about the unfairness. Ms. Kolko spoke about unfairness to women, but no, young people are being treated unfairly, as usually. There are twice as many employed among the young, and they haven't worked enough, so they're not eligible according to these criteria. So for the people who are the most vulnerable to the slowdown demographically, I'm not talking about the family burden, but we're not doing anything for them. So I think that these aspects should be all taken into account. Thank you very much.
For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I perhaps summarize somewhat, but in hearing Mr. Guéret speak, he indicated he disagreed with Bill C-50, and I heard the member from Dartmouth Cole Harbour speak about why you might disagree with the bill and so on. But what do you tell those workers that will be benefited by this bill? 190,000 or thereabouts, of roughly $900 million or so over 3 years. How do you stand up and vote against a bill like that, like the members of the Liberal Party did and the Bloc also and proposed to do? What do you tell these workers? Craig Riedel, UBC professor and member of Older Workers expert panel, had this to say: study on long-tenured workers found that these workers are hardest hit by unemployment, take up to 35% longer to find new employment than other workers. And it really is a question of taking the dollars and targeting it to those who need it most, those who have paid into the system, worked longest, and need that support. How do you oppose those by saying we don't want to have those benefits? Now, I heard Mr. Casey speak about how you need to take this particular measure in context of everything else that's happening and that we're doing. And we've added 5 weeks of benefits across the board, about 300,000 workers or Canadians estimated to be benefited. We added training for about $500 million for long tenured workers, $500 million for approximately 40,000 long tenured workers, $1.5 billion on top of $2.5 billion for training, and something I'm sure that the Federation of Independent Business would be supportive of. And we had targeted initiative for older workers, $60 million, and 5 to 20 extra weeks of benefits in this proposed legislation. When you take it as a group of programs, a suite of programs, you'd have to say that a significant amount of benefits will be flowing out. Significant steps have been taken, but specifically with respect to the work sharing program, I know there have been a number of quotes. I have one here from the Michelin Tire Company, who has 500 employees benefiting from the work sharing program. And here's what the company spokesman had to say: the work share program has allowed us to avoid layoffs and maintain our workforce. This program is a win-win-win for the company, our employees, and the government, and positions us well to rebound quickly when the market demand returns. And I'm almost hearing the same thing from Mr. Casey from the Forest Products Association of Canada. So there are divergence of opinions here and different things that need to be done, but taking what we've done in context, you know, it obviously is something that is beneficial, but specifically with respect to work sharing, how has what have your employees and workers, how have they responded to the work sharing and Bill C-50 that we're proposing?
Well, certainly the work share program has been an enormous benefit to the industry. We know of a number of mills that would have probably closed permanently if it had not been for the work share program. Companies were taking advantage of the program before the changes were implemented in the budget. And a number of companies, as I said earlier, come on after the budget, and that's where the problem lies for us. We'd like to see those companies not be sort of quote-unquote penalized for having sort of been in good operating order before the budget and then get on board with the program after the budget. So we'd like to see some changes there. But you're correct. Overall, the package, to some of the earlier questions, no, it's not a silver bullet in C-50 that's going to cure the industry's problems. Certainly the package, as you put it all together, is of great benefit to the industry, and has certainly kept a number of mills running and kept employees in the communities where they belong.
And 1 minute, just quoting your president from the Forest Products Association of Canada, Evrim Lazar, and he had this to say: the investments in worker training, the extension of work sharing are welcome initiatives that will help more Canadians keep their jobs and employers hold on to talented workers. And I know that when I listen to the Fédération des Travailleurs du Québec, again, you're saying take what you have on the table and keep working. And so when you look at all of those programs that have been in place and how they've been focused towards helping employees during these difficult times, I guess your premise still is take what's before you, pass that, and continue to monitor the situation. Would that be correct?
Well, sound is not very good in this room, so I'm not altogether sure. But certainly one thing I did say is that the work sharing program has been a very good initiative, and as was the 5 weeks extension. And this, and the monies have been flowing through training. I mean, we have absolutely, of course, no question about this. So, however, I mean, we feel that, as we've said, that this particular project is worrisome because of the discriminatory aspects that that it contains. I mean, and to us, I mean, the fact of the matter is that only 30% of all long-term unemployed reach the end of their. It seems to me that under the circumstances of this, recession, that's somewhat unusual. To give the benefit across the board would have been the right move to make. And as for if just one little thing, there's the issue of if you want to help long tenured workers, there's the accounting of how do you call that, pay leave. That's a real issue for a number of our members. They accumulate this, and when they expect to be able to use that money to do something, retrain, move, whatever. And when they go to the unemployment office, I mean they're told that this is incompatible. This is something that this government could do tomorrow to help an awful lot of people, long tenured workers who've been accumulating a leave pay, and that would be extremely worthwhile and help people right now.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Komarniki. We're going to go to the last questioner of today, the Liberals, and we've got Ms. Minna.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to get back to a couple of things. One was what we hear a great deal all of day today is, and also from the support of the bill, is that this helps those most in need. And I'm having some difficulty with that because it seems to suggest that people who've worked the longest and has the longest tenure are the only ones that are most in need. There are women who are being left out, people who work part-time, others who have lost jobs, who are in and out of the workforce, or are low income and what have you, immigrant people who don't qualify under the 7 years below that you don't get anything, and getting jobs for them is very hard. So I guess my question is from the social aspect and what have you, is to Ms. Yanesian. In terms of who needs it the most, I mean, I have difficulty, I feel like I'm playing God here, picking and choosing who gets, and that they're not necessarily those who need the most. And the other is, with respect to women, I don't know that if any gender, well, I was told actually by the minister, we were told that the gender analysis was not done on this bill. So how do we know, in fact, what the impact is with respect to women, who also in high need, let alone choosing who needs it the most? I find that comment constantly being used to be quite difficult to take. If you could.
Thank you, Madame Mina. As I said in my opening comments, even the most generous interpretation of who is affected by this legislation leaves 2/3 of those who have lost their jobs that are in this category unaddressed, and does not address anybody that lost their job in the fall. So it doesn't matter how you slice and dice it. If this is a good measure, it should be extended to the people that are in that category that lost their jobs last fall too, or the majority of those that are in that category now. What is happening is that men that are losing $30 an hour jobs and are having a very difficult time finding even $15 an hour jobs are finding that their spouses are willing and able to take temporary, and I underline temporary, jobs at $15 an hour or self-employment. as in every other recession, women are filling the breach. This has happened in the recession of the 80s and the recession of the 1990s. So women are not getting the benefit of the unemployment insurance benefits, and they're not also getting the benefit of strong jobs in the labor market, but they're willing to support their families' finances. The problem is that this is now the new structure of the labor market, with more temporary jobs and more lower paid jobs. And even if you've got a job, there's huge downward pressure on your wages, your pensions, and your benefits if you can hang on to that job. This is not a sustainable industrial strategy, and it is not a sustainable strategy for maintaining what's already a fragile recovery. So part of the answer, yes, is to extend the reach of what income support can do, but also to maintain a very careful eye on how the jobs that are being created are coming into place, because this is going to go on for an awfully long time.
And just a final question, if I still have time, Mr. Chair, to the CFIB representatives. You mentioned that you were talking about training and providing that for people as opposed to the Now, if someone is unemployed or has lost their jobs, are you suggesting the training under the EI system where they would receive an income, or training with a company where the company would pay a salary for the training? I'm not quite sure how you're...
It would be the latter, in that
the company would pay the salary for training?
The company would pay the salary and get a bit of a break on the EI component for that employee in order to help train that person and get them into position, because we already know small businesses invest so much in training as it is, and it's becoming difficult for them to do that. So this is a way to sort of encourage them more training. It's actually based on an idea that was done in the late 1990s called the New Hires Program through the EI system, and the New Hires Program encouraged businesses to create jobs by giving them what they called an EI holiday.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so it's the same concept that we're proposing here, but the idea would be that it would be allow for on-the-job training, which even the OECD has said is the most effective way of getting people back to work.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank all our witnesses for taking time out of their busy schedules to be here today. We're going to let you guys leave, and I just want to talk to the subcommittee because we want to arrange the best time for a meeting tomorrow. So I'm going to just adjourn the meeting, but I want to talk to the subcommittee about picking out a time for tomorrow. Okay? Meeting is adjourned.